has been.
So how do you explain these pictures we're seeing of fares that the driver is showing what the passenger is on the meter and the passenger is getting on their phone? What's the ambiguity? I've seen too many of those now that
I cannot explain them. So
okay.
I would
is that something you're investigating?
I would welcome the evidence to see where this is occurring, because the taxi fixed price service clearly states the passenger will pay the lesser of the fixed price that was given to them at the start or of the meter. So in this example that we've heard this morning, if the meter was 38, that is what the passenger would have been charged.
Okay, Chair, we might follow up with the other examples we got last week as well, because we had a number of them, and it's just there's something that's not sitting right with me here in terms terms of the overall piece.
We would also love that clarified on the.
Just to recap, then, so 12% of the meter is the service fee. There's a €1
tech
fee as well, and that's paid by the passenger.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, grand. And then another data question I have is, in terms of the number of drivers who have exited your platform after onboarding within 12 months, what information do you have available on that? I'll start with Uber this time.
How many drivers have exited
after 12 months of onboarding?
Yeah.
What's the attrition rate?
I wouldn't have that number to hand.
That's something we might follow up on as well. Yeah. Would Bolt have that information?
I don't have that to hand, but we can provide that information.
For you now?
We're actually up 10% in drivers as of this month versus last year. So 10% up in terms of specific drivers who've left. We'd need to follow up.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is because obviously, quite rightly, Mr. Hart, you've pointed to supply as an issue as well. I just find it curious that we haven't got information on why drivers are exiting platforms, and we can take it as a fair proxy that if they're exiting a platform, they're exiting the industry as well. So I think if we're going to come at this discussion around supply, we can talk about barriers to entry for sure, but we also need to talk about why they're exiting too. And we can't discount the fact that income could be an issue here, and I think that's a reasonable proposition to make. With regard to the VAT liabilities, I raised this with the representatives earlier on. I know that Poland has asked platforms to register domestically in order to be compliant with VAT rules as well. Why isn't that a step that's being taken here in Ireland? Is it because it's not legally necessary, or?
As in the state of Poland has asked.
In Poland has required platforms, taxi dispatch platforms, to register domestically as for purposes of VAT in their home market. Why has that been taken by Uber Ireland?
That would be a question for the Irish state, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. But then my next question then is in terms of the VAT liabilities for drivers. Do you make drivers aware when they sign up to your platform that they have a VAT liability? It's a yes or no.
We do.
And where is it made very clear, or is it in the terms and conditions? I worked in tech, so I've seen terms and conditions written in front of me. So
we have a website which, at a web page, if you Google search now Uber Ireland driver VAT, I'm sure it'll be the top.
When the driver onboards onto your platform, is there a specific part in that onboarding package that you are VAT liable and you're required to register for VAT?
We make, and again,
that's a yes or no answer.
We have the information readily available. It's very publicly available. Yes.
You don't. It's not proactively shared with the drivers who onboard onto your platform.
I would believe it is.
Okay, well that's something we might follow up on separately too. The reason I ask is because obviously to renew your SBSV vehicle licence you need a tax clearance certificate. You can't get that tax clearance certificate if you're not compliant with VAT liability and VAT registration. That has an effect over time. So again, when we're talking about supply, which is quite rightly you've pointed to at the start of the session, we could have a situation where you have hundreds of drivers who aren't able to renew their licences because they have massive VAT liabilities and they're not able to attain the tax clearance certificate they need. So I would like to hear from all of you with regard to tax liabilities. How proactive are you with communicating to taxi drivers that they do have tax liabilities? Because ultimately, all of us in this room want to ensure a supply of taxis. So I would appreciate follow-up from Uber on that, about how proactive you are engaging with taxi drivers in terms of determining their VAT liabilities, if you don't have that information readily available today.
Deputy, our position has been the same since we've been here for 12 years. So in terms of how well the drivers are informed, that information is there. It is not specific to Uber. That is tax law.
So then you're confident that there aren't issues that tax clearance certificates aren't being renewed as a result of VAT registration issues and VAT liability? we've had the model for 12 years. We've been operating exactly the same way that we have for over a decade in this country. And you are satisfied that there should not be an issue with tax clearance certificates for drivers that are unable to renew their SBSV licences?
I'm unaware of that. We have 12 years of experience of working in this role in this country.
So you don't think that there is a source of worry from drivers who have flagged this issue that were previously unaware of their liabilities here?
I would think the 12 years of operating here would speak for itself. Okay,
grand. My final question then relates to research that you're interested in putting, and quite rightly you're all dispatch operators, and we've always had dispatch operators in Ireland. They've kind of the local rank. I think looking at this industry from the outside in, people would be worried that we don't want to approach to an oligopoly or duopoly in terms of the dispatch operators that we have. So I'm keen to hear about the proactive research engagement and data sharing that you have with the NTA, starting with you maybe, Free, now, to inform overall bid. You have an amazing amount of data, and it will inform the supply and pricing problems that we feel. So I'd love to hear more about what each of you are doing in that space as well.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. So we have our biannual meeting with the NTA. We also submit to any of their we had one on dispatch operators in, I think, November, where lots of other operators were in the room. Some of the ones you mentioned, kind of from small towns, large cities, some of the more traditional radio taxi companies were there as well. There was a follow-up from that we submitted data for. Any request we get from the NTA, we provide data. We work with them closely, and we'd welcome any opportunity to share more.
Okay. We also provide data to the advisory committee
as well. Thank you.
Yeah, similar to Free Now, we meet with the NTA biannually. We regularly are reporting data on trips, how they're fulfilled, what portion of drivers are on our platform, when they're working, peak times. So we're very open to sharing data at any request from the NTA.
Okay, and Uber?
And similarly, we filled out the same surveys and have worked with the NTA in those same biannual meetings to help draw that picture. We really, really want to help the NTA see that lack of supply across the country.
Great. And all three of those reporting sources, I know I'm over time, Chair, all three of those reporting sources, they're all publicly available for public consumption, or are they just shared directly, confidentially with the NTA?
They were shared directly with the NTA.
They're not made publicly available?
There would be some competitive intelligence in there in terms of, trip numbers, revenue.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. Are there commercially insensitive versions of the reports you would be open to publishing in the future? I think to inform this public debate, you three have a role in this, ultimately, in terms of informing public debate. This can't be just a conversation with the NTA. It needs to be a conversation with wider society as well. So I'd encourage you all to think about how you share that research. Obviously not compromising your commercial sensitivity, but share that research from the overall debate. Thank you, Chair, and I apologize for that. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up on that, Kieran, yes, it's a matter for the state, the issue of VAT, but we've heard consistently from drivers, taxi representative bodies today, last week, that the VAT is a major issue for them, and as Deputy Moynihan said, in the context of renewing their licences. But it's equally a matter for Uber. Like, is Uber giving any consideration to registering for VAT here in this country? Is this something that, based on the evidence we've heard last week and again today, that Uber would consider?
The model, as I said, Uber BV, which is the company that provides the technology to drivers, and there's a service that the drivers are purchasing. That is our model that supports our whole European business. If the Oireachtas would like us and wants to frame it so the drivers are made, well, dispatch operators are doing that, then that is obviously something we will comply with, yeah.
And I know Deputy Moynihan mentioned Poland. You're not aware of that requirement in any other EU member state?
I'm not. In fairness, I'm not aware of it in Poland.
Okay, we can come back to that. Senator Cosgrove, followed by Deputy Crowe, followed by Senator Duffy.
Thank you very much for coming in. And I suppose, like being here, that you're all profit-making companies, and you're all in competition clearly with each other as well. I mean, there was even a kind of a pop at each other about VAT return, about how VAT is being accounted for. And they're clearly, if Bolt are extending outside Dublin and Cork, that that there's room, you are making profit. I suppose that's the ultimate goal. But we've seen over last week and this week that, and I've never seen it before in a committee, that there's been 2 weeks with so many discontented drivers, and there's obviously so many representative groups, and they're not happy. And if there's no drivers, there's no taxis. I mean, that's a very basic point. So I suppose our job is to listen to the reasoning of why taxi drivers aren't, they're not happy, and there's obviously justification for that. We have to look at provision of taxis, and I'm from a rural constituency, and we have to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly. But I'll start with Free Now. I suppose you speak in your opening address about driver safety and about a survey done. I'd like to ask you a bit more about that survey. Is it publicly available? What was the sample that you used for the survey? And because clearly safety has become an issue, particularly with Free Now, if people are feeling that they have to keep answering calls or else they're going to be removed temporarily from the app. But I'd like to ask as well about, I suppose, the technology fee, like, I know, all the other contributors here have brought this up, but we have heard of instances that technology fees are 50% of the overall taxi fare. And so when you say that, and objection, you would know that, I suppose to hear it too for you know, but how can you say it's €1 or 1.50 when there is evidence that we have been given photographic evidence, and I've seen it myself, that the customer has been told this and then the driver has been getting a total different picture. So there is then an animosity being created between the passenger and the taxi driver. And so I just would like to hear more about that, or how ye can actually, where this information is publicly available, you know?
Yeah, so thank you, Senator, for your questions. I think, you know, there is strong competition in Ireland. I think that is one point that, you know, everyone will agree on. But it's also a more, you know, because we operate with passengers, drivers and the business, so you're trying to balance the interests of all groups. And that's why we commissioned this report as a kind of, the Taxis for Ireland coalition don't have taxi drivers as part of the coalition.
And why aren't you a member of Taxi? When the two other groups are, how come you decided not to become a member?
Taxi drivers themselves don't like the Taxis for Ireland coalition because it's calling for deregulation, you know, further levels of supply.
And have you evidence to say that taxi drivers don't like that? Is this from your survey?
Yes, we do. We have a number of different surveys. So we had 10 last year. We can share summaries with those, with the committee members.
That'd be great. And what was your sample?
On that, 92% of drivers in one of the surveys said that the Taxis for Ireland coalition doesn't speak for them. So it's pretty stark.
And have they been? And then who are they? Representative of another body, another taxi federation body?
You know, so the two gentlemen that spoke before us, they're another body, and then there's 4 or 5 other bodies who spoke last week. So they would be. And I think one of the things that has come up a few times over this committee is to have more of a joined up voice within the taxi driver side. I think we would welcome that as well. In London, I'm the general manager for the UK market. The London Taxi Drivers Association has a very strong voice. We liaise with them a lot. And in Ireland, there's quite a lot of voices. So we'd welcome the opportunity to kind of speak to.
And who was your survey with? That's current
taxi
drivers
drivers
that are signed up with yourselves.
The samples vary. We regularly get at least 500 drivers on potentially more engaging topics, over 1,000.
Which is very little in the
free
grand
now,
scheme of
drivers.
people that are involved in driving in taxis in Ireland. You know, 500 is very small.
True, but it's the sample we have, and then the more engaging ones we have over 1,000. But that's our focus, is to engage with taxi drivers where we can. So Danny has a lot of relationship with the members who've spoken here, but our drivers are what are accessible to us. So that's.
And would technology fees be the main problem that comes up? Is that this you know, and I can see why, you know, if taxi drivers a customer's being told they're being charged one fee and that it's going to the taxi driver and it's not, it's going to, how can you justify the technology fee just on the offset? It's very high. You're like, what's the service you provide for that technology?
So on the technology fee, you know, the other operators here today spoke, it's between €1 and €1.50 across the different operators. That is standard and upfront on the taxi fare. Where it can differ is on the priority. If you really want to get a taxi quickly,
it's unequal immediately. It's, you know, it's actually favouring someone with a bit more money. It's favouring someone, you know, straight away.
There's plenty of examples of that throughout society. So I used the airport example earlier. If you go, even at the airport, there's multiple examples. Do you pay to park in the car park right beside the airport or slightly further away? You know, there's different examples in you know, lots of throughout society. But I think
but so you do have that priority bucket.
What I wanted to make clear though is that it is always transparent what goes to the driver. So if somebody orders a priority taxi, on the driver's side, a bonus will appear beside that trip when it pops up. It's not kept by Freenow. The vast majority of it is transferred to the driver in order to get them to accept the trip, because there is...
But the customer's not aware of that.
They are.
They're aware of this as well. So where is the inconsistency between the prices then and what the technology fee... would you say that there is 50% technology fees in some cases, of 50% of the fare?
So I think that's where it becomes tricky, because if the fare is a very high value fare, a taxi driver, even at a really busy time, will accept it because it's going to the airport, it's 30 or 40 euro. If you're going from here, say, down to Bagot Street and it's a €6 fare and it's a busy time, no taxi driver wants to accept that because there's lots of other better fares out there.
I think that's the whole problem then about structured taxi. You know, the availability of taxis in certain areas. I'm just going to go, so thank you for that. I'm just going to go to you here in that. I suppose, do you use digital profiling to fix your prices? Digital profiling of both passengers and of drivers to fix your fares? in overseas, in America, do you use it? What do they call it? Instead of fixed fares, they call it upfront prices.
I can talk to the Irish market, which we're here to talk to today.
But if you use it, how come you use it there and then you wouldn't use it over here? Is there
very different markets, apples and oranges you're comparing. So we are regulated within the taxi market here in Ireland. So it's a very different market.
Have you any intention to use that? If you could, would you be using profiling, digital profiling of the consumer, of the passenger and the driver to set fares?
We'd love to have more taxis so we have the availability to have a larger service. And that is what we're here today to really push for. The
I would be very concerned, I suppose, about GDPR, around GDPR measures around that, about profiling to set fares.
So just to be very clear, no, we're not using profiling to set fares here.
Here, okay. And I suppose this is just my final question, Georgia. If you're extending your market, if you're extending out that you're going to be going into more rural areas, what are your kind of idea, or how are you going to address the idea of the lack of availability? Because we've seen that there's still a lack of availability. It's chronic lack of availability in rural Ireland. And most taxi drivers that I've spoken to would argue it's because of apps, that people are all gravitating towards bigger towns. Can you see yourself, can you see Bolt having a role to have actually structured times within rural Ireland?
We would support any measures to try and address the lack of supply of taxis in rural Ireland. We can't force drivers to drive where they want to. We fix them in terms of linking passengers' requests with drivers that are available. So I think we need to address sort of that issue of driver availability and supply, encouraging more drivers to join the industry, allowing them to do so and stay in the industry.
And linking in with other available public, like linking in with have you engaged with other areas of the NTA, other organisations like Local Link, or other provisions that you'd be able to work together with them? Is that something that would come under your business model?
Absolutely. We're happy to work with any local transport organisation, provide data, see where our services are plugging gaps. That's a really key part of our role as a dispatch operator and a data-driven organisation. We operate other services in Ireland in terms of micromobility too, so we're very happy to look at how all of those different transport services can work together, and that's why we would like to expand as well.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Cathal Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask at the outset, and sorry, thank you for being here today. You have a number of fixed contracts, I'm particularly honing in now on free now, so I'm chairman of the Oireachtas Education Committee, which will meet next door very shortly, but the state has a pretty major contract with a lot of taxi companies for transporting children with additional needs each morning. So the driver knows the pickup has to be at 8:30, whatever, drop them to school, collect them in the afternoon. There's no booking required, it's just a set. It's a set arrangement, it's paid by the state. Does Free now impose a charge on contracts like that?
So we don't have the contract to do any of the kind of work with children, because there's an additional criteria that's needed that we don't currently have in place. It's something we'd look to do in the future, so we don't have that contract. In terms of those contracts with the civil service, we actually go through a very competitive tender process, and there are quite considerable discounts given to kind of public bodies as part of winning those tenders.
But what I'm really honing in here is that type of arrangement, contract, whatever we want to call it, it's a very set arrangement. It's Monday to Friday, specific pickup, specific drop-off. So maybe I'm naive here, but I don't think there's a booking app or any technology fee required there. So I'm just wondering, why are you in this sphere at all?
So most of the contracts we have are with, the OGP or the court services are not these kind of set jobs. They're more on an ad hoc basis. And they do have a heavy discount as well. Okay.
But you're nowhere involved with the Department of Education, but you want to get involved?
I mean, we
in what level? Because that concerns me, yeah. You might think that's a good thing, but I would see major concerns with getting you involved in those kind of morning pickups.
At the moment, we don't have the technology to allow us to do that.
Okay.
Anything that brings, the ability to bring more trips to our drivers is something we welcome, but we're not currently set up for it.
So could I just back to the apps then that you all host? Look, they're very convenient and they are useful. They serve a purpose. You've also spoken about driver safety and all of that. I want to ask, beyond talking the good talk, does your app and technology do anything to protect the driver in the car? It was the winter of 1989. There was a murder in my own community. Henry Hurley, a taxi driver. It's still an unsolved crime. 2 men in his taxi murdered him. And it remains unsolved. And he's just one of the headline cases. It's happening every weekend. So is there anything built into that app where a driver can't reach forward, grab his or her phone, ring an emergency call? Is there anything in the app or anything in your technology that allows him or her to alert that there's an incident unfolding in the car? Or is it just talk here about driver safety?
I'll take that first. So we have a number of safety features specifically for that case you've just described. So we have something called Trusted Contacts, where drivers can upload trusted contacts, family, a friend, emergency contact for us. So in the case of, we also have an emergency assist button. So if a driver or a passenger finds themselves in a situation such as that, they can use the emergency assist button in the app that goes directly to emergency services.
Okay.
And it also creates a ticket to our safety priority team, so we can then investigate that case, get in touch with the driver. If we can't get hold of them, we can then speak to their trusted contacts as well. So that's a couple of features that we have specifically for that.
Okay, well that's a positive answer. Can I revert back to Free Now? I note that you operate in 9 EU countries: Austria, France, Germany, Greece, here in Ireland, Italy, Poland, Spain, United Kingdom. Is the technology fee comparable in all countries, or are there variations?
It depends. It's a country by country basis.
Yeah.
The thing about the kind of SPS fee in Ireland in comparison to other countries, the legislative framework is incredibly different. So, for example, in the UK, there's 250 licensing authorities, whereas here it's the NTA. So it's on a case-by-case basis.
And would you give some commentary on where it's at, and maybe our nearest neighbours, the United Kingdom? What would be a standard technology fee there?
It's about the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called something else, and it's, there's different mechanisms, but yeah, about the same.
Yeah, I would largely want to weigh in and concur with the points raised by Senator Cosgrove just a few moments ago. So we would continuously, particularly now that our committee is doing this body of work, we've had people around our constituencies send us in, photos of receipts and things, and I think mostly people have quite a generous feeling towards taxi drivers. I think they do a tough job. They're valued in the community. I think people generally appreciate that the costs of running a car have increased quite a lot. The technology fee has become, it's a feature of modern life, and it's somewhere in there. But I have seen instances where it's very extortionate as well. And I'm wondering, I note that of all the sector, I know Free Now have 85% dominance in the market, and is my understanding, is that the current situation?
Well, first of all, the apps only represent about a third of taxis within Ireland.
Okay.
And then after that, then,
Are you 85% of the app sector?
I would be surprised if we were.
Okay. Your colleague shaking his head, but the internet's telling me that's the case, but I don't know. Look, the internet, who can believe the internet anymore? Have the NTA, has anyone ever, expressed concern that, dominance of any one of your applications isn't good overall for public transport?
So I think, considering the three of us here today, and the kind of level of competition within Ireland, I don't think that's an issue, and the number you quoted there seems very high to me.
Okay. Can I next ask, just relating to Uber and rural Hackney services? I was in the States recently, and Uber there works as I think it should work. You get chatting with the driver and you find out they're an elementary school teacher. They finished work 2 hours ago and they're going to do a few hours of driving to supplement income, and that's fantastic. And they're doing it in their local community. It's everyone's benefiting. It just seems to me that potential hasn't been fully unlocked in rural Ireland. I know it's an aspiration of all of your companies to as it is for me, because I'm a rural representative. But what do we, if there was one thing for us to hone in on in terms of policy change, could Mr. Hart or Ms. Headman tell us what needs to change here, really?
Thank you, Deputy.
Headman, sorry.
In terms of what can help is supply. So what we are calling for is more drivers and more vehicles, both Hackneys and taxis, right across the country, and especially in these rural areas. There is no lack of willingness for people to want to be able to drive. And as I said in my opening statement, we are often getting contacted by people who are teachers who would like to drive in their towns over summer, or they're partly retired, people who want to drive just over the weekends. And that's actually when we need them most. We don't need another 30% of taxi force coming in to drive Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. What we need is driver availability to map when the demand is there, and that is weekends. That is over busier times. What we're calling for is for the NTA to make it more accessible for people to enter the industry and to pay for a vehicle. What we constantly hear, and we believe that we have the solutions to really help solve these challenges we're seeing in rural areas, what we need is the support of the NTA to make that cost effective for drivers, for people to be able to drive a taxi or a hackney in their local area without having to pay the upfront costs we're seeing now of $80,000 for a vehicle down to the market.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Before I let in Senator Duffy, so in every taxi journey you have booked through a platform. You have the platform, you have the taxi driver, and you have the passenger. So how do each of you describe your relationship with the taxi driver and the passenger? Who do you identify as your customer or your employee, or maybe another description? So how do you view your relationship with the driver, first of all, and primarily the driver and the passenger? You first of all, Danny.
Yeah, so we jointly provide the transport with the driver. So we think of them as driver partners in the provision of partners.
Yeah, just for both.
Absolutely the same. They're
Partners.
and they're
And for you?
Yeah, partners.
Partners. Okay, so we had 6 representative bodies in last week. We had 1 representative body. When is the last time you engaged with your partners in a room, in a public forum, listening to what their concerns are, taking on board their concerns and making changes? So in 2025, did you sit down in a room with your partners?
Yes, so we have a driver committee. We went through various formats of it last year where we invited people into the Free Now office, sessions over 2 or 3 hours, once a quarter. We tried to nominate people, then we moved to an open invite. I also, have spoken to some of the witnesses who spoke last week over WhatsApp and email over the last year as well.
So do you have a partner advocacy group, is something like that? Yeah, okay. Georgia.
Similar, we have driver engagement teams, so we have Facebook groups, etc., ways in which we can communicate directly with drivers and hear their concerns. We also have run pop-up events in Ireland, in Dublin, in Cork as well, so the drivers can come work with us when they're trying to onboard on the platform. We can help them with any issues there as well.
And Kieran?
Similarly, we have thousands of drivers on the platform that use
partners, yeah.
They use our platform, and they're customers for us as well. Like, we are trying to provide the best service, so they are choosing Uber trips over Free Now trips, over Bolt trips, over Street Hail trips, over the many, many options they have in the marketplace. So they are our customers. We are looking at the best ways that we can continue to serve them. And engage with them through every time they touch that app, every time they open it.
I understand, but did you engage with them, your partners, in a room? Do you have a partner advocacy group? Do you engage with the leadership of the 7 representative bodies that were in this room last week and today?
I have applied and not been accepted onto the Transport Advisory Committee a number of times to engage in that work where those bodies are represented.
So there's no advocacy group established within the Uber structure whereby you can engage on a quarterly basis with your partners?
We engage with them, they're all independent operators.
I understand that, yeah, but not in the same format that Free Now and Bolt mentioned.
We wouldn't have days where we speak to tens or 20
And do you not think there's merit in
drivers.
that, in listening to what the views are, what the concerns, trying to be a better organisation, taking on board the views of your partners, that there's merit in engaging with them on a quarterly basis, for example?
There's always, absolutely, getting feedback from drivers is key to the business, as I said, to understand what their priorities are. I think the challenge is when you're dealing with thousands of drivers, as I mentioned before.
Yeah, but you have a chair and a secretary of the 6-7 representative groups that we met. Like, you don't see merit in meeting them on a quarterly basis, or certainly sending out an invitation to come to the Uber offices. Let's chat, what are the issues, let's see, can we work together to sort them out?
And if that's something that those groups are interested in, they can certainly reach out to us.
But to date, that hasn't happened.
Well, many of them wouldn't be Uber drivers. We don't have contact with all of the drivers across Ireland. We are looking after the customers who are the drivers who choose to use Uber.
And just coming back then to the tech fee, the commission, and I know what you said between 12 and 15% then, including the VAT commitment. I got a lot of correspondence from drivers in particular over the last number of weeks leading into last week's hearing and this week's hearing, and one driver emailed me about the example whereby he was offered on an Uber fare, I think 39 euros for a fixed fare, I think of 70 euros. The meter read 69 euros, so he got his 39 euros. Uber got 30 euros, and I'm trying to reconcile that then with what you're saying is a 12% commission.
So that can't work. The way the system works for a fixed fare service is that a passenger is given a fixed fare up front, and then if the meter becomes down under that, then we charge the passenger that meter fare. That's in line with regulations.
But if the meter is over that? If
the meter is over the fixed fare, they pay the fixed fare. So you're always paying the lesser.
So was that driver incorrect then? That cannot be the case?
That cannot be the case.
That's what you're saying to me in evidence here today. Okay. Senator Duffy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Kieran, Georgia, Sam and Danny for being with us here this morning. No, I've listened obviously to some of the contributions, and generally from my experience, I'm based in a town called Ballina in County Mayo, and in terms of the people that contact me in my office, a lot of the complaints that I receive is just the lack of supply. So I know it's been mentioned here, and I think that I have great enthusiasm for the innovation that has been created over, I suppose, the past decade in particular, that can help respond to that lack of supply. And I think that if there is smart decision making and smart policy making, there can be an approach that protects existing taxi drivers, while also allowing that to be supplemented with better supply and interventions like we were talking about this morning. Like I would prefer someone complaining to me about a receipt, about a cost over a weekend that is actually getting home safely, as opposed to the constant amount of people who contact me who are standing at a taxi rank where there are no taxis, because the people who are providing the taxi service are legislated, legally allowed to be a taxi service, are only working Monday to Friday, maybe 8 to maybe 5 o'clock. That's not all of the cases, but it is a large majority of them. So there needs to be the application of innovation that we have to meet that gap. And that can help people who, for example, in Mayo at the moment, there are issues just this week in the local media where we have people who are not regulated, there's a black market being created because this is such a problem. So because there hasn't been proper solutions put forward, we're now enabling a black market which is way more unsafe than any complaints that are made about, say, app-based solutions, where you know your driver's name, you have the record of the journey, and I think it's generally a very good service as long as it's managed in the right way. I don't think we should demonise totally. I do demonise for sure if there's extortion, but general market response and innovation, I think, is something that should be supported in an appropriate way. And I think that there's great opportunity for that for young people who are in college at weekends, as opposed to who are looking for part-time work. It's mentioned about teachers at summertime. And the question that I'd like to ask, is it possible from a market and a legislative point of view that we can have that where there's clear gaps in service provision? Can there be, I suppose, temporary or part-time deregulation at weekends, or a step down from the problem that exists at the moment? Because I ultimately care about my constituents getting home safe and having a taxi at a rank. That's my ideology, is that people get home safe. I put it that way, and that's not happening at the moment. And because it's not happening, the black market is intervening, and that is a dangerous place we're entering. And Deputy Crowe highlighted an example in his own constituency many years ago that speaks for itself in relation to that. But I just welcome your contributions on it, Kieran. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. And it is something we heard from Vintners Federation of Ireland last week at the committee and through restaurants. Like, so many of these businesses are impacted by what is a lack of taxis. And it is the lack of taxis we need to focus on. Like, we're talking here about an app charging too much to customers. That's only made possible because there's not enough taxis servicing this market. We just need to get more supply. And I agree with you. There are going to be, I got married in Enniscorn, I spent most of my summers up there. It is a perfect example of a market where there are loads of opportunities in the summer months, on weekends. What we need is to have a system that enables people to enter the industry. And we don't want deregulation. We want to make sure that they are regulated. We want to make sure the drivers have all the same data vetting checks. We want to make sure the vehicles are checked to the same levels of the taxi industry. We just want more of them, and we want the barriers reduced to entry so people can do it only over a weekend for only 3 months of the year and not have the costs there that they are required. If they're going to become a taxi driver, they are locked into having to work 5 or 6 days a week and make that a full-time role for themselves.
Yeah, I just would reflect all of Kieran's comments there. You know, we really aren't for deregulation. There's a lot that our apps have brought in terms of improving safety and compliance controls and checks for both our passengers and drivers. But it's, you know, we look in other markets when we meet with drivers, they really look to our service as a benefit that they can earn some money while they're maybe pursuing other avenues of work and feeling entrepreneurs in their own sense. So, you know, how can we address those barriers that Kieran has spoken to and reduce them, but in maintaining that safety and compliance that the regulatory framework does offer, but to do so in a way that can support people coming home from work, people who from a night out or from home from work, from late at night in the nighttime economy, and people who rely on that door-to-door transport when, you know, another transport solution isn't necessarily accessible to them. You know, while the supply is reduced, there's poor outcomes for all, really.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely an issue, and what I really welcome is some ideas on how we solve this. But I think what happens is when we conflate the rural supply with the general picture, is we end up with more drivers coming to the towns, because the people that you mentioned, they potentially won't enter the industry, and what we'll do is we'll have full-time drivers going into the towns and cities, and our data suggests that they'll start making €400 less a month. So what we would love to see is a targeted approach towards not just small towns and villages, large towns as well, areas where they struggle to get taxis, and you end up with two systems. Because if we reduce the requirements to get in, you know, if we look at the numbers in counties around cities like Clare or some of kind of rural Limerick, the actual numbers in Limerick, Senator Cosgrave, are going up significantly, but they're not going to, you know, they're not going to the towns of Limerick, they're going to Limerick City. And the same thing will happen here if we kind of bring down the standards. So the local area Hackney is completely unfit for purpose at the moment. Maybe that's not even the right vehicle to fix this issue, but we need to fix the issue.
Thank you. Deputy Boyd Burrett.
Thanks, Chair. The add-on fees, Kieran, Danny. You said that the booking fare earlier on, how much did you say it was?
The technology fee is €1 to €1.50 on a standard taxi trip.
€1.50. We were given a thing by the taxi drivers here earlier on, which shows a technology fee from free now at €7.50 on a fare.
So in that instance, the passenger ordered a taxi priority in order to get a taxi quicker, usually at a very high demand period. The driver would have been paid a bonus by Free Now in order to fulfill that, because at times of peak demand, a lot of drivers will tend to pick people up off the streets or go to the rank. So in order for the apps to compete with that at that moment in time,
that's dynamic pricing, really, isn't it?
It's not, because
surge pricing, really.
The regular taxi fare will always stay the same. So that is a passenger choice. The difference between dynamic pricing, say in the ticket industry, you know, the Oasis thing that happened a few years ago, there was only one channel to buy that ticket. It was, you know, dynamically going up the whole time. taxi fare will always stay the same in the taxi fleet. Priority is below it, and it's the passenger's choice to choose it. They have two options.
Well, just to be clear, that sounds to me like a sort of two-tier access to public transport, and the person with more money gets the taxi, which isn't, to my mind, the basis for a good or fair or decent public transport system. And I mean, the example, just so we just underline it, taxi meter fare and the price details, it was 8 to 18 euro, technology fee 7.50, booking fee 3. So you were talking about those add-ons, the technology and the booking fee being 40 or 50% of the fare.
Just to clear up on the booking fee, that is set by the NTA. So the NTA set both the meter and the booking fee within Ireland. So that's not something that Free Now or other operators kind of deal with. That's
okay. Did we get clarity on the VAT liabilities from Uber for your drivers? Or, well, they're not your drivers, actually, drivers on your app. Could you clarify that?
So the discussion we've had around the VAT today is that the VAT position isn't unique to Uber or the taxi industry. Drivers engage with Uber BV, who's incorporated in the Netherlands, for the technology services. And as EU...
So because you're based in the Netherlands, not here, the driver may be liable for the VAT?
Yeah, and that is the outcome of the EU and Irish VAT laws, which we comply with.
And that's true with Bolt as well, is it?
No, we collect VAT on behalf of our drivers. We are an entity here, and so we pay VAT here.
I mean, I'm struggling, and maybe you could answer, I'm struggling to see how it isn't a better deal for the driver and for passengers and consumers from every point of view for us not to have the NTA provide an app where they would have lower commissions taken from the driver, but the revenue would come back to fund public transport infrastructure, where there would be absolute transparency and no add-ons on what's charged to the consumer, and where the driver gets a fare that's negotiated in a fair way to ensure that it's a sustainable income for them. I mean, I can't see from anything I've heard or anything you've said that isn't a better option for the provision of public transport. And even in terms of accurate information about what's available. I mean, one of the things that the drivers are telling me is, you know, your information, the information on the availability of taxis comes from different companies depending on how many people happen to be on your app. But taxi drivers tell me at certain times they turn off all apps because it's a busy time in town and they can pick up the fare and, you know, so like from every point of view, isn't an NTA app better for the provision of public transport for the taxi driver and for the customer? I'd like to hear from all of you on that.
Well, we welcome any competition. I think, you know, the fact that these three operators are operating in Ireland in conjunction with, you know, the regional taxi companies, you know, all of the towns and cities in Ireland will have local dispatch operators. They're about a third of the business. We're about a third of the business. But, you know, Free Now has invested significantly in things for passengers and for drivers. So I'll give you an example. If you are pre-book a taxi to the airport today and the driver's late, you'll get €10 off your next trip. If the driver cancels for whatever reason, you get €50 off your next trip. These kind of things are things we've built up through investments in the kind of Irish taxi business over a long period of time. You know, our office on Bagot Street, we have staff in Waterford, and we invest heavily in making the app work better. Halo started in Ireland in 2012, 2013. So, you know, we've got 12, 13 years of iteration of improving the app, making it quicker, improving the service for passengers.
Yeah, still doesn't convince me. So can I just ask one other question before my time runs out, but I would like to hear from the others. You mentioned that there's 15, now if I missed this while I was out, by the way, that there's 15% that you're charging. But I understand today there's a 25%. And is there even a 75%?
No,
there's not, but there's a 25%.
Yeah.
So that's a lot more than 15%, and that's taking from the drivers.
Yeah, so I think on that point, we launched a saver option in conjunction. We did a survey with drivers. You know, the market is very competitive. Uber launched a fixed fare. Passengers, in terms of our surveys, are looking for more price-efficient ways of getting a taxi. And the feedback from drivers was, if you have to provide a discount, then it should be linked to the meter. So the way the saver fleet works is 25%. 10% of that is going into a discount for the passenger. We're also contributing up to €4 million in discounts for passengers. And if you look at that saver fleet right now, it'll be 15% off the meter, 5% funded by Free Now, and 10% by the driver.
Okay, so the driver gets hit, but the driver's what they get gets hit. And presumably, you then favour the drivers that are willing to do that and
Absolutely
pay
not.
you
So
a higher commission.
that is entirely optional. So drivers are free to opt in, to opt out.
But if they don't opt in, you're going to favour them, are you not?
No, so I mean the regular taxi trips, they'll still get as many trips on that as they did beforehand. So there's no favorism. it's completely opt in or opt out, just depending on what you want to do. Some drivers might decide that it's a very quiet week and they want to get more fares because, you know, studies show that passengers will take more trips if the price is slightly cheaper. So we're driving incremental trips for those drivers. Some other drivers might work with a local taxi company or they have a contract with the local school. They don't need to do those trips, and they don't. And it's that optionality that we provide.
Just briefly, just respond. Yeah, you want to ask the same?
I didn't get a response on why it wouldn't be better for us to have
very
an
quick,
NTA. And sorry, the figures being quoted about Uber are that you are on average taking 30%.
I have to have respect for the other members
Sorry,
as well.
apologies.
Just a brief 30-second response from each.
I think just on the booking tool, you know, I think a booking tool can help people access the services, but, you know, if you have a limited, smaller supply of drivers, that's not solving the reliability issue that we're seeing for passengers across the country. So, you know, while the booking tool can link people, if you have that limited pool, then you're restricting services for people that do rely on that door-to-door travel. So that's not addressing the issue of the taxi supply in terms of the way that it's being booked.
And just from my perspective, competition is welcome. What I would ask the members of this committee is to make sure that the NTA are focusing on solving the key problem we've spoken about today, which is supply. So investment and resource needs to go into building app as opposed to putting grants into the marketplace, getting more drivers. We are not going to solve these rural problems. We're not going to solve the problems we're seeing in cities today that are supply-based just by creating another app and investing in another app.
Okay, thank you. Just maybe Vice Chair Shane Moynihan and Senator Cosgrove, maybe 2 minutes each, 2 or 3 minutes each, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go and talk about supply now for a while as well. As you're rightly saying, Mr. Hart, it is a core issue. That being said, it is also important we talk about pricing because we have a role to consumers, we have a role to passengers, we have a role to drivers as well. So it is as important as role. But anyway, with regard to kind of the rural areas, Mr. Gorman, you mentioned the local area Hackney pilot that the NTA has trialled. In terms of direct engagement from all three of you with the NTA on the design of rural specifically focused schemes on supply, outside of the general issues around barriers to entry, which I have discussed with other bodies, what sort of engagement have you had with the NTA in terms of the policy-driven interventions that they need to determine in rural areas and rural towns to address the overall shortage? So I'll start with Uber and then work down.
Yeah, thanks very much. Georgia, as part of the Taxis for Ireland coalition, we have sent a white paper to the Transport Advisory Committee and to the Minister talking about how some of the downfalls of that local area Hackney. And again, I made the comment at the start of this session, the local area Hackney scheme is only trying to solve issues in really small hinterlands where no taxi service exists. It is ignoring the fact that there is huge supply issues where there is some taxi service. So we think that it's actually not fit for purpose. We believe we need to start looking at serving rural services where taxis are just undersupplied. How do we get more taxis into that marketplace? We had a number of ideas on how to do that, and we have submitted that to both the TAC and the Minister.
Okay.
Yes, so as part of our role in the coalition, we're part of that messaging and regularly speak on that with the NTA and have been part of submitting those pieces.
Okay, and
Yeah, similarly, we submitted to the last process. We also work inside on the local area Hackney, so whether the driver in Castle Pollard, we kind of invested quite heavily in that to build up tech to facilitate that, and it just hasn't taken off. So, yeah, we welcome any opportunity to solve that problem.
I think that's an area we'll have to look at ourselves as well, Chair, just in terms of how we inform that over our conversation. Again, my kind of call to you earlier on, what you can share publicly to inform the subject debate, I think would be useful. Ultimately, the attractiveness of the industry for drivers is something that's important as well in terms of it being an income for them too. So I want to kind of cite that. But thank you to all of you for your contributions.
Thank you. And finally, Senator Cosgrove.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, and thank you for all your contribution. I agree with Deputy Boyd Barrett. I still fail to see how a public app wouldn't be the obvious solution here. I mean, the NTA invest money in this sector as it is, and I don't see that they're getting the return that they need. I'll come back to the very same issue that supply will not be solved unless there's drivers, and drivers are the ones, I suppose, that have brought up this issue because they're not happy. And I think that the lack of engagement that we've been hearing from all of the companies with drivers, that it's not fixing the problem, and the problem is not going to go away until there's proper open communication between providers, yourself, between big app providers and drivers. And there doesn't seem to be a willingness from listening here to give straight answers about how people can directly engage, how important. I know you spoke about having driver surveys, but I suppose the rights of the drivers and how it's impacting their daily lives, not only their salaries but also their work-life balance. And I don't hear that engagement from yourselves. I don't see that commitment that you're able to give towards drivers to ensure that they stay in the sector. And I suppose that's what I want to just finish on, that I don't, from listening, and I've listened to all the contributions, I still don't see how, if drivers are not happy and drivers are not, they're not going to stay in the sector, and that's not going to affect, that's obviously going to affect supply. And I suppose that's why I would love to see if there is any information that you can provide about your engagement with taxis or with drivers, and about your and what level that engagement was, but also going forward how these disputes are going to be resolved until the NTA have made a firm commitment. And just, I suppose, Free now, you haven't mentioned at all about agreeing with a national taxi strategy, and have
absolutely.
You? I know
we would absolutely
would like to see a national taxi strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. So now the difficult job for me to sum up just over the last number of weeks. So we've obviously, between last week and today, heard different perspectives, the strong and consistent views of the taxi alliances. And I do, and I did it last week, I just want to acknowledge taxi drivers in general, the trusted service that they provide the length and breadth of the country. And obviously today then we've had evidence from the platform operators. And I think if there is agreement, I think it's the agreement on the scale of the challenges that the sector faces, and particularly around supply and accessibility, and obviously driver income sustainability as well, which is directly obviously related to the supply issue. Significant differences on pricing models, regulatory impacts, and the distribution of risk and responsibility within the system. And then it comes back to the customer as well, which is obviously at the heart of the work we do within the committee as well. And when the customer, when the citizen cannot get a taxi, more often than not, they can't get to work, they can't get to a healthcare appointment, perhaps to a school, or so many areas of social participation. I think obviously the committee will reflect and would be very supportive of a national transport strategy, and any such strategy I think needs to focus on outcomes, improving availability at peak times, particularly as well then in obviously rural Ireland, where many of us are from, stronger accessibility in practice, and a fair and transparent framework that works for everybody, works for drivers, but also in particular for passengers, and I think any strategy, like, we need to support more drivers to enter and remain in the sector. So look, the committee will continue to work in the context of advocating for a national strategy, and I think that's something, I think there's support amongst the taxi alliances, amongst the, you've confirmed it's in most of your opening statements as well, it's on the record the support of a national taxi strategy, a strategic framework, for the next 10, 20 years, that we as a committee will continue to work with the NTA, with the Department of Transport, with all stakeholders. I'd really encourage better stakeholder engagement between the platforms and your partners. I think that's really important. I think it's strong with some of you, but not so strong with others. And I just would ask you to reflect on that, because ultimately we all have to work together. Platforms, drivers and customers, and obviously the committee then will reflect on recommendations in terms of shaping and prioritising any actions within any national strategy or national taxi strategy, and including the consideration of a national public transport app. And in earlier evidence there was examples given in terms of other countries, other jurisdictions. So on that, I just want to thank Mr. O'Gorman, Mr. Pook, Mr. Hart and Ms. Heathman, and any of their colleagues that may be here as well today, just for assisting the committee in this very important matter. The meeting now stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. next Wednesday, the 4th of February, when we as a committee will again meet in public session. Thank you very much.